位朋友，大家下午好，欢迎各位参加由 Mentorico 蒙科和 EMCC 欧洲导师与教练协会联合主办的100场导师技术在线论坛。那今天是第44场，由来自巴西的 Eva 女士主讲。她给我们今天带来的话题是在教练辅导中，教练自己就是结果的影响者。首先，让我们来简单认识一下今天的演讲嘉宾 Eva 女士。那 Eva 女士，她是一位注册心理学家，她目前是有 EMCC 认证的督导，同时也是 ICF 认证的大师级教练 ，ICF 的认证评审官。她有25年的企业高管经历，同时也有将近20年的高管教练经历。那他是 Phoenix Coach 这家公司的董事总经理，同时也在巴西多所著名的高校，其中包括里约热内卢联邦大学担任客座教授。那今天活动的主办方是 Mentorico 蒙科以及欧洲导师与教练协会 EMCC。那欧洲导师与教练协会是总部设在比利时布鲁塞尔的，专门为导师、教练和督导提供国际认证的非营利性组织。Mentorico 蒙科是源自1981年，是企业导师技术以及组织隐形技能管理的全球知名教育品牌。蒙科的总部也是在比利时布鲁塞尔。我们在全球有将近600名的专业顾问，然后在41个国家和地区为各类组织提供隐性技能萃取和企业导师传承相结合的培训和咨询服务。蒙科中国是专注在国内本土市场开展企业导师制以及组织隐形技能管理的培训和咨询，是 EMCC 认证受证的中国唯一导师服务机构。我们同时也提供 EMCC 认证的导师课程。那接下来我们就把今天的舞台交给我们的演讲嘉宾。Now let's warmly welcome Ms. Eva.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and honored and grateful for this opportunity of talking to you. Our theme for today is the use of self as an instrument in coaching. And our learning objectives are to reflect on what we bring with ourselves to each coaching session. When we walk into a conversation, there are many things that we're bringing with us. So to become aware of them and to examine what I call our backpack. I'll cover this in more detail in a few moments. So the specific subjects will be the science and your unique art in coaching. Also the relational field that is formed between each client and their coach. And finally, I will bring some questions for you to reflect. You'll have some moments to reflect. And maybe at the end of our presentation here, we'll have some time to collect your answers. I would love to hear what are your insights based on what we've discussed today. So let's start. First question, use of the self as instrument. Is there just one self or are there many other mini selves in us? Well, the idea of mini selves in action is brought by Professor Tatiana Bachkirova in her book, Developmental Coaching. And she has, in the book, there is this illustration that I brought for you, many mini selves working at the same time to express who we are and how we behave in the world. So maybe there is a more mature mini self, there is a more needy mini self in action. Who are they? But this is not so relevant if you believe that there's just one self. We can also go with that idea. It's just to examine which parts of us or how we as a whole express ourselves into the world. Another way of looking at it is to for instance, use these 3 beautiful paintings of the Great Wall. If you look at them, they have the same frames. The view is the same, the view of the Great Wall, but through the lenses of different artists. And then the final product, as you see, is completely different. So I like to compare this idea to the sense that the competencies that we learn as coaches, that's the framework, that's the science. We all have to respect the ethical boundaries and know how to express the competencies. But if we were to have 10 different coaches in a room, alternating between coaching the same coaching client on the same topic, you would have 10 different conversations, because no coaching conversation is the same. It will depend on the person, just like these paintings. So that's your art, the way you express your competencies, the way you bring them to life, that is your art. So there is this beautiful quote from Martha Graham, which was a very important North American dancer. And she says that we all have this vitality. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. It is translated through you into action. And because there's only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. So think of the energy. That's another way of thinking of the self. What is the vitality that can only be expressed through you? Because who you are is how you coach. That is a quote from the Coaching Supervision Academy, where I got my certification as a coach supervisor. And I think this is so true, is just you as a coach can do the coaching that you do. Nobody can imitate you. You probably have attended many demonstrations, you've seen other people coaching, but you wouldn't coach the same way because you're bringing yourself into the conversation. So if you're bringing yourself or your various mini selves, if you're bringing you, what if you could use this more deliberately? What if you paid more attention about who you're being in each conversation and what you're bringing to each conversation? What if you could be more aware of the impact that what you bring to a coaching conversation has on the client? So this is what we're going to explore a bit with the help of this metaphor. The backpack, as you see, there is a small lady being pressed by the gentleman's backpack in the public transportation. Maybe it's the underground or a train. I've been through that many times. I'm also a very short lady, and I've been hurt so many times in planes and buses and trains by people who don't realize that their backpack is heavy and is taking a bulk in their body, and as they move, it can hurt. So after having been hurt so many times, I came up with a metaphor. What if you think of this also as a way of thinking that you are bringing stuff into the room, into an imaginary backpack that is there. And if you're not aware of it, you may be hurting people. So what might be in a coach's backpack? I've asked this to many coaches, and I have answers like strengths, gifts, talents, experience, competence, ethics, many beautiful things that are in the backpack, but also fears, beliefs, limiting beliefs, judgment, biases, and so on. So if we have any of these elements, the last elements that I started to mention, like fear, etc., how will that affect your coaching conversation? And if you're not able to have access to the first elements that I mentioned, the gifts, your strengths, your values, how will you be missing opportunities to be more effective? So it's important to know what is in our backpack as we enter every conversation. What's in there? I'll let you think about it also to see if you come up with other elements other than the ones I've already mentioned. And if you think of anything else, you can share that with me as we have a conversation and the questions and answers that we're going to have a bit later today. So I love this quote. I don't know who the author is, but it's not mine. I just have to say it. I have to find out who said it, but I love it. Your presence is an intervention, just your presence. You cannot be neutral. You are part of the partnership. You can remain impartial. You can choose not to share your views because that's important that you don't tell the client what you do. However, you just being there, your presence is an intervention. And it's important that we remember that we are partners in the conversation. There's the element of partnering in coaching. So if we are partners, we are part of the relationship. How are we impacting the relationship? It's another element that we have to take into consideration. So if we are the interveners in a way, through our presence, through our listening, it's interesting to have in mind this quote from Otto Scharmer's book, The Essentials of Theory U. The success of an intervention depends on the interior conditions of the intervener. If we translate that to coaching, the success of your coaching intervention will depend very much on your interior conditions. And I like to compare, he says, Otto Scharmer, not me, Eva. Scharmer goes on saying, I like to compare our interior condition to a field. Each field has two dimensions, one that is visible, that is what's growing above the surface, and one that is invisible, what's beneath the surface, that is the quality of the soil. So the same distinction applies to some fields, social fields. We can see what people do, the practical outcomes that they accomplish in the visible realm, but we rarely pay attention to the deeper root condition, the source and interior condition from which they operate. So that's what I'm calling the self as instrument. So our presence being an intervention, people may know how we express ourselves, notice our tone, our manners, our language, and the way we express our knowledge. But what is the soil from which we are operating? What are the minerals? What is the quality of that earth? That is beneath the surface, but that's the source. So that's another way of looking at the self as an instrument of intervention. The soil, our soil, where things may grow beautifully or not. If we think of presence in coaching, we may think of the client, of yourself as the coach, and then there is a relational field. So these three are sources of information that we need to pay attention to during each coaching conversation. So what the client brings, this evidence, we're listening to the client, we're listening to what is said, we're listening to what is not said. That's a very important competency to develop. But we also need to listen to ourselves and know how we are impacting the relational field that we are creating with that client. And all of these become sources of information for our coaching practice. If I feel anxious, for instance, the anxiety may come from myself, but maybe the anxiety is in the relational field. So I have to be very clear about what is it that triggers my anxiety as a coach versus if I'm not anxious, but I notice that the conversation is becoming anxious or that we're feeling stuck. These are elements that we have to pay attention to. My supervisor, Mrs. Fiona Adamson, has this lovely quote: models, theories, and tools are only as effective as the person who brings them into life relationally. So you may know all the tools, you may know the models, you may know the competencies, but how do you bring them to life? In that relational field, in the relationship that is created with your client in the here and now of every conversation. So, my first invitation for self-reflection would be, how can you become more present to yourself or to your mini selves, if you prefer that, and what's going on in your mind? And how can you become more present to this space, to this relationship that is created and has its own vitality during a coaching conversation? What information is that space giving you? So you're not only paying attention to the client or not paying attention to your inner chatter, but you're also paying attention to, is the dance flowing? Are we stuck? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? What's going on here? How can you become more present to that? So I'll give you 1 minute to think about that, maybe less, but you may start writing your initial answers to that, and maybe you would like to reflect them back to us so we can have a conversation. Okay, I hope you had some beautiful insights. Moving on. As a coach supervisor, I have the opportunity to witness many challenges faced by coaches in that relationship, in that relational space that they create with the clients. And I would like to share some of them just as examples. You may identify with one or two or three. Maybe you will identify with more, maybe you won't identify with any. Doesn't matter. The idea is to know that there may be variations for you of what I'm bringing. They're just examples of what commonly may happen with coaches in their inner chatter and that they bring to coaching supervision. So the first thing is the perfectionist saying, I need to get it right. I was wrong. I chose the wrong approach. How can I ensure that the next time I will have the right tool to use? That doesn't help. And we'll soon see why. The other one is the imposter syndrome. Say, I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I don't think I can handle this client. It's my first time coaching someone in this position. I don't think I'm prepared. I don't know enough. And if something goes wrong, it's immediately the coach thinks it's because I'm not good enough. This is also quite common in supervision. The other theme that we see quite frequently is coaches who think they are responsible for the success of their clients. So if the clients are not moving, or if the clients say they feel the coaching conversation is helping them, but the coaches cannot see concrete results yet, they think they're failing. And they think that success means responsibility for the client's results. If the clients are successful, then the coach is successful. If the clients fail, then the coach has failed. And that's not how it works. We are two individuals in a relationship, the coach and the client, and we have to meet our clients where they are and let them work at the pace that they're able to work. Of course, we will balance support and challenge. We will challenge them to become more and to realize their full potential. But it doesn't mean that we are responsible for their results. Sometimes coaches feel surprised in a situation and they think that the client expects them to pull a rabbit out of the hat. So I heard this from a supervisee once. I think every time I go and have a conversation with a client, I need to pull a rabbit out of my hat. So create magic. And that is create a magical solution to solve the client's problem. Well, it's not up to the coach to do that. Sometimes the coaches are very fast paced and they think the timing of the client is wrong. So they put the client in the situation of being wrong, of not being whatever enough. So there was one example before where the coach is not good enough. Now this time the client is not good enough. There is also the situation where we project our own story and experience to our coaches. I call it the Me Too syndrome. For instance, if you're coaching someone who's going through a career transition and you've also made a career transition, and the coach then is saying, oh, the client is not daring enough. I know because I've been there. To do a successful transition, you have to dare. Well, you. They're they with their stories. So that's not good either. The other thing we see quite often are what I call the pet subjects. There are some subjects that trigger in us coaches the wish to talk more. I hope this will resonate to some of you. I certainly have my pet subjects. For instance, when I work with family-owned businesses, this is one of my passions. So if I don't pay attention to my backpack, because that's one of my passions, well, I will start talking more than the client, or I will be tempted to go into consulting mode, but that will not help the client. So I have to know that I have that pet subject, but it cannot trigger me. It's quite different. Something else that we see quite often is we're concerned with our image, especially when we're hired by corporate clients, and we are worried that if something goes wrong with one client, they won't hire us for further coaching engagements. And actually what I've been describing can sometimes happen in many of these situations together. So I may think I'm not good enough, or I have imposter syndrome and concern with image. For instance, these things can happen together. Some coaches need to be liked, and then they tell me I am just too nice. And I don't challenge my client enough, because if I do, I'm afraid they won't like me anymore. So that's not a helpful way of looking at the relationship. So going back to what we were drawing together, this relational field, we are born, all of us, human beings, with a drive to connect and a drive to survive. All of us. That's who we are as human beings. If we, as coaches, are more attuned to the drive to connect, we use ourselves, our whole selves, to strengthen that connection. If we are unaware of who we are, if we are concerned with all these examples I just gave you that came up in supervision quite frequently, we are in the drive to survive mode. We are focused on our performance. We are focused on our results. And by that, then we are weakening the relational field with a client. And guess what? Guess what? Where does good coaching happen? Where does great coaching happen? When we are connected. Then magic happens. So, how can you ensure that you are not bringing yourself into a conversation with your own fears and your need to survive? Because they'll be there. Another point that is always important for us to remember is that we are humans. We, coaches, are human. And it's quite often that I see coaches saying, imagine, I just found out I have a limiting belief. Imagine, I just found out I have a bias. Well, welcome to humanity. Of course you have limiting beliefs. Of course you have biases. Of course you have fears. Of course you have the need to survive. You are a human, and your humanity is the greatest gift you can bring to the conversation, bringing your whole self deliberately, and not by fear of not being enough, not by fear of losing the client, because that will impoverish the quality of your coaching. And now, as a final exercise, I would like to ask you to go inside your backpack, your imaginary backpack, and search inside and reflect, what is your unique gift you bring as a coach? What is your art? What is the energy, the vitality, as Martha Graham said in that beautiful quote? What is it that you bring? If you're more aware of it, you can resort to it more deliberately. So think a moment. Write it down. So now that you've identified your gift, how can you become more connected to it? How can you ensure that in every conversation you're working from that soil, from those minerals in that soil? So you bring yourself to the client and you can attune to their gifts, to their unique talents. Now, if we don't clean our backpack frequently, there may be things that will become obstacles. So, knowing you, what may be in your backpack, your personal backpack, that may become an obstacle when you're connecting with your clients? For instance, sometimes the coach can be very competitive. Sometimes the pet subject, as I said before, the example I gave before. So, what is it that may hinder your connection with your clients? So, as we move to the question and answers, I would love to hear your answers. I hope you will share them with us because I'm really curious. I love to have this conversation about this theme. Finally, how will you keep fine-tuning your most precious instrument? And that is yourself. Just like fine-tuning a piano, a musical instrument, how can you work on this idea that your presence is an intervention, your soil? How can you make yourself better to serve? Well, these are my first ideas, and now we will explore them together in the questions and answers. And I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
And first, I'd like to share some of them with you about the answers to your questions. And some of them have given some comments and answers.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we have translated some of them and I'll put it in the chat box.
Okay.
The first question about is what is in your backpack? And we have some answers, both positive and negative. Yeah, we can see there are empathy, curiosity, being sincere, working and life experience, and also some emotions like fear, anxiety, and worries.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing what's in your backpack. I was curious if the metaphor would resonate. And so you've looked inside. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the other question about the how to become more present. This question actually is more difficult than the first one. As we have some person says that can have tea or coffee to calm down self first and be focused, or do some breathing exercise.
Yes. Whatever works for the person. Breathing is always very helpful, or tea or coffee. I dance.
Yes, and also
it's my form of grounding.
Yeah, and also they have a question. Actually, they would like to listen to your answers to the question how to become more present to relational space, because this one might be difficult.
So that's a question to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, you have to start having this in mind, that there is the client, there is myself, and there is this space, which is magical, that we have created together. So it is like a dance, because I'm a dancer, maybe it's always the metaphor that I bring. So an example is sometimes you're feeling stuck and you notice the client is stuck. So the relationship may be stuck. We have gotten to a point where we don't have the sense we are progressing. So that's a source of information that we can then use and share with the client, not as a universal truth, but with curiosity. Paying attention to the relational field is becoming curious to how are we dancing together. Another example is if I am afraid of sharing something with a client, is it possible that this is a reflection of our dance together? Is it possible that the client is afraid of sharing something with me? So we look at that and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Maybe our dance is a dance of fear. But you think about it, and then you can inquire with the client by pausing the dance for the moment and say, can we have a look at how we're evolving together? Anything that might make you feel more comfortable? Are you comfortable enough to share, or is there anything else we should be working on? So you just look at the dance as a source of information, how you are experiencing that dance with the partner. I hope that helps.
Thank you。那我们刚刚呢，在刚刚的分享环节当中有一个问题，就是我们观众给予了反馈，同时呢也想Eva，然后他也来分享一下他的观点，就是这个问题是我们如何调动自己的场域，能够让自己更沉浸在这个跟客户的关系空间里面。那首先我们提到了在这个关系场里面，就是有我跟客户，然后我们之间形成了一个关系场空间。那这个空间呢是非常神奇的，我跟客户之间的关系，我们俩就好像是在共舞一支舞蹈，我们在共舞。但是我们常常也面临一种情况，就是我们突然好像就卡住了，就是我们在这段关系里可能发现突然没有什么进展。那这个呢，它也是给我们释放了一个信号，就是告诉我们可能要比如说暂停一下。那这个时候你可以跟你的客户去跟他沟通，就比如说我们先暂停一下，我们来可能做一些可能其他的，我们比如说做一些呼吸练习这样的，让你感觉更舒服一点。因为有时候比如说我作为教练本身，我可能在跟客户沟通的时候，我可能有点恐惧，我害怕跟他去分享一些内容。但同时的，可能这之间你们之间的舞蹈有一个流动，可能是相互影响的。客户他也会就有点害怕，就不那么能够开放的去向你分享他的想要分享他的这个经历，分享他的这个问题。那我们就不如在这个关系场里，我们就一起停下来，然后做一些让我们跟客户之间都感觉更舒服的方式，调整一下状态。这样呢，才能够让我们的这个关系更积极的进行下去，让我们的辅导能够更流畅的进行下去。Thank you for your answer, and we here have some questions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and I will stop for you to translate. That was a huge piece. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. And the question is about the beautiful quote, the vitality for life force and energy. This person asked how to prepare ourselves for showing the vitality, life force, and energy.
Well, I think it depends very much on each person.
首先，我们朋友问了第一个问题，就是我们刚才分享中有一段引用的话，就是关于我们自身可能有一处活力、一处生机、一处能量。那问题是让我们如何去展现出这种生机能量？那这个回答是，这个可能要根据每个人的情况，因人而异。
And it's about connecting with ourselves. It's what makes our heart sing, for instance.
这个
And how
更
do
多
we and how do we practice those activities that make our heart sing and bring that vitality into our life?
这个更多的是就是我们如何跟自己产生一个连接，就是我们如何去调动我们那个一个内心的状态，就是让我们的心就好仿佛在歌唱一样，这样充满生机。
So I have shared that for me, for instance, dancing is a way of connecting with myself. I said that before. But maybe walking in nature for someone, meditation, of course, any practice of connection with yourself that works for you. But it's important that you're connected with your passions because that's your force of life.
那关于这个具体的方法，像我刚刚提到的这个一个比喻，就是我们说，就是教练跟客户之间也是像在共舞一支曲子，就是一个舞蹈的状态。那大家也可以选择使用自己的方式，就像我们常常说的，比如说冥想，但不管是哪种方式呢，我们最重要的是要跟自己产生连接。那这个连接的点主要是一定要你保有一个热情，因为这个热情呢，它体现的是你一个生命的活力能量。
Thank you, I see.
Thank you. And we can move to the next question. How to deal with imposter syndrome when coaching a client who is outstanding in his or her area and a bit arrogant?
So that's a beautiful question. Thank you for that. I see two elements in that question.
这个问题，第二个问题呢，是我们刚刚提到了，就是 Eva 她在教练在做督导的过程当中，然后遇到了就是一些他的客户，然后给他就带来了一些问题。那其中就是有的人他可能会有那个冒充者综合症。那针于这种人，我们就是拥有这种症状的人，我们该就是如何应对？因为有的人可能有这种冒充综合症，那特别是在他面对对方是一个非常优秀的客户，在他的领域非常的出色，但这个人他性格呢又有点傲慢，那对于这种情况该如何处理？
So the first element is how do I deal with imposter syndrome when someone is outstanding? And the other element is I am judging the other person as arrogant. So they're separate.
那这个问题我们体现了就是两个方面的，它应该体现出了两个方面的因素，一个是就是我如何就是在面对一个比较出色的人的面前，我如何去处理我自己的这种冒充者综合症。然后第二个问题就是关于我可能在评判对方，因为我觉得对方他是一个比较傲慢的人。
So it's important to know that we bring our judgments too. So I am probably judging the other person as arrogant, even if they are being arrogant, but it's my judgment. And what do I choose to do with my judgment in a coaching relationship? That's important.
首先，你面对一个客户的时候，你带了一点的评判心理，你评判对方这个人怎么样。那这里就是有一个问题，就是我首先如何去处理自己的这种评判的这个心态。
So going to the first part of the question, the best way to deal with imposter syndrome is stop comparing yourself.
那回到这个问题的这个第一个信息点，就是如何去应对这个冒充者综合症。首先，第一个就是你要去保持一个客观的状态。
So you are a human being in front of another human being.
那你呢，在另一个人面前呢，你自己本身也是一个人，因为你身上就具备人性的这一面。
And that human being has also fears, anxieties, and insecurities, even if they are outstanding.
那其实这个对方他不管，他既然是一个人，他不管表现出可能是傲慢，但是他一定也有，比如说像焦虑、恐惧、不安全的一面。
So, for instance, if I'm judging them as arrogant, I can come up with the idea. Usually, when we're being arrogant, it's to compensate our own insecurity. So maybe that client, no matter how outstanding they are feeling insecure.
那如果就是当你遇到一个人是比较傲慢的话，其实你可以想象他其实在利用他的这一方面的性格来正好弥补他的另一面，他的另一面可能就是他是一个没有安全感的人。
So that's an example. If I come in with imposter syndrome and maybe the client is also insecure, we will be dancing a dance of insecurity and each one trying to show to the other one how good we are.
那我既然我是一个冒充者综合症的话，我有这个综合症，那就是意味着我也有这个不安全的一面。但其实这个时候我们可能在就是内心状态上某种程度其实是对等的。那这个时候我们可以针对就是这个话题，我们然后进行共舞。
So again, I don't compare myself. I bring my humanity and I inquire, how can I best be of service?
那所以，首先第一个，你就是首先不要拿自己就是做一个比较，就是不要拿自己跟别人对比怎么样的，就是不要觉得自己好像是做这方面做的不好，这方面做的不够。首先不要就是对自己有一个评判，然后第二个你要认识到我们每个人都有就是比较人性的一面。第三个就是你要考虑我该怎么做，然后才能很好的帮助我这位客户。
I hope that helps.
希望我的回答就是对大家有帮助。Thank you, thank you very much. And 大家如果还有其他的问题的话，可以现在还可以再提问。We have another question. I like the comparison between interior condition and the field. Yeah. What does interior condition specifically include?
So that quote is from Otto Scharmer's book on the theory U. So literally it's the interior condition of the soil. So the minerals in the soil. But then we can think metaphorically, but I'll let you translate first.
第三个问题呢是刚刚有一个非常棒的比喻，就是把我们的内心状态比作块田地，然后那这个内心状态具体指什么？其实刚刚在这个比喻这一段话呢，它是出自这个 U 型理论里面的。然后在这段话里，它其实是把这个我们内在的状态是比作这个土壤。
So metaphorically, we can only offer to our clients what we have learned to offer to ourselves. For instance, compassion.
那在从这个比喻的程度来讲的话，就是我们可以想，就是我们能带给客户的，其实是首先是我们能带给自己的。这个举个例子，就比如说你的同情心。
So compassion is not complacency, but compassion in the sense of embracing ourselves as we make mistakes, as we try and fail, understanding this is a vital part of the learning process and to keep on trying.
刚刚这个词就是同情心可能不那么恰当，一个更好的说法呢，应该是一个就是关爱之心。就是这里指的是你面对自己的错误，可能各种失败的时候，都能够去依然拥抱自己，能够去 接受并拥抱自己的这些错误，然后并能够从中学习。最重要的是你敢于去尝试。
So if compassion is one of the minerals in our soil, then we can grow compassion to deal with our clients. If we are too judgmental of ourselves, that's the prevailing mineral in our soil, and we will probably tend to be more judgmental about our clients.
那当我们就是在我们这个土壤里去埋下一点关爱之心的种子呢，那它可以去孕育的越来的越好。那我们可以把这样的就是心带到我们的这个辅导过程当中。但是如果我们种下的是你说像比如说这个评判的偏见的种子，那它可能孕育出的这个土壤就是不那么有利于我们的这个辅导。
Another element of the soil is how curious are we really, or how are we trying to get things right and thinking in terms of right and wrong instead of being curious.
再举个例子，就像这个土壤，也就是我们内在的状态。它比如说，我们对任何事物时刻保持一个同情心，或者是我们就是面对是非的一个态度。
Yeah, so I hope that has answered.
希望这个回答能够帮助到大家。就是刚才我们提到了这个内心状态，然后就把它比作一个土壤。那这个内心状态可能有，就是我们有比较积极的一面，像就是我们的这个可能关爱之心啊，或者是好奇心这种。然后比较另一面呢，可能就是这个我们的评判、我们的偏见，这个呢是我们需要注意的，要注意并且控制的。Okay, there is considering the time, I think we can share the last comment about the final question, the how to find to our instrument. Yeah, we have a friend who said we can breathe together with the coachee. We can just like you shared, we can cut and let's do breathe together. So we can realize the adjustment.
Yes, but as long as the coachee is willing to do that, don't forget we're partners. So is the coachee willing to do that? So there's always the element of invitation to the coachee. Would it be helpful for you to breathe before we start? Can we have a grounding exercise? And if you invite and the coachee is okay, that's a wonderful idea.
Great, thank you. 那最后一个我们的分享是，就也关于到我们就是 Eva 问的最后一个问题，就是我们如何就是调节、微调我们自己这个工具，可能在就是遇到一些问题的时候，有一位朋友他分享了他的观点，就是我们可以在这个过程中暂停，我们跟就是我们的客户一起做深呼吸这样的练习。那这种情况是可以的。那一个前提就是你的客户他是愿意这样做的，就是你可以邀请你的客户，我们可以就是做一些可能小练习、小活动或者是什么的。那只要对方愿意的话，那这自然就是一个非常好的方式。Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much for your wonderful sharing and just the great answers. And after the webinar, I will send you an email about the audience, how many people watched the webinar today and what's their feedback. So thank you again for sharing.
Thank you again. Thank you for your work, Icy. It's lovely to be supported by you. And thank you everyone in the audience. And thanks for participating. Loved your question. It has been your questions. It has been an honor.
Thank you. It's really a great pleasure. And that's all for today's the sharing and the Q&A. Thank you, Eva, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. 我们非常感谢 Eva 女士今天的分享以及问答环节。我们感兴趣的朋友可以回看本期讲座的，就是本期讲座的这个视频，到时候我们会在我们的这个官方平台上，然后会有公布。那这里我也做一下我们下一期讲座的预告。下一期讲座是在5月30号，然后是由来自英国的我们的大师级教练，也是 EMCC 认证的督导，来给大家做一次就是实时的一个 demo。这次 demo 它的主题呢是极简教练，就是如何用最少的话，然后引起最深的蜕变。对本次就是讲座感兴趣的朋友可以扫二维码，然后报名参加我们的这次活动。另外，我们也在这里分享一下，就是在下周六，应该是这周六，我们的5月27号下午，我们到时候这里会有那个欧洲导师教练协会的月度会员开放日，这个我们是在每个月的最后一个周六，然后也是为了给就是我们所有的导师教练督导以及有兴趣然后成为导师教练督导的朋友们提供一个交流分享的平台。那这里呢，我们会得到导师教练督导的一个最新前沿资讯，也会了解到如何获取这个导师教练督导的相应国际资格认证。那关于本次会员开放日的这个具体信息以及报名方式，大家扫右方的二维码，然后可以进一步了解。关于这个国际导师的这个认证，我们这里也跟大家分享一个好消息，就是我们的新一期课程即将在6月中旬开班。那我们也开放了限时的优惠名额，那感兴趣的朋友可以迅速的然后联系到我们。在这里我也顺便介绍一下，就是我们的这个国际认证导师他有什么不一样的地方。首先它是在140多个国家通用的，然后呢它有就是5个特色5个特别的点。首先第一个是我们的这个导师他是要帮助学员选对方向做对事情，然后第二个是我们的导师在帮助学员达成目标的过程中，他也会帮助学员实现一个能量的提升。第三个是我们的导师会帮助学员去既激活他的一个外在资源，同时也会激活他内在的一个资源。第四个，然后是我们的导师辅导成果，像我们设定的 KPI、KDI 和 ROI 都是可以被有效计量的。然后最后一个特色呢是我们导师会具备一个组织隐形技能萃取这样的技能。那懂得这样技能的导师，一方面他是可以向学员传承自己的这个经验智慧，另一方面还可以萃取他人的这个经验智慧，然后传承给学员。我们非常欢迎大家就是能够来报名咨询，就是我们的这个新课程，然后也非常欢迎大家加入我们这个导师认证的大家庭。最后，我们跟大家分享一个由我们 Mentoring 蒙科和组织隐形技能全球智库 GO-TKM 联合主办的重磅活动，在今年的9月3号至5号，我们即将在瑞士达沃斯举办第2届全球组织隐形技能管理论坛。那关于这次论坛的详细信息以及报名信息，大家可以登录我们官方网址 3w.go-tkm.org。那这个活动呢，也是到时候是线上线下同步进行的，大家可以进一步了解。同时，就是在本次论坛的第一天，也就是在9月3号，我们同步推出了绿色大奖 GLA 的一个颁奖典礼。我们的绿色学习大奖是为了表彰在绿色学习方面取得重大成就的杰出个人或者组织。那我们此次 奖项呢也设置了4个奖项，然后1个个人奖和3个单位奖。那么我们就是欢迎任何就是在绿色学习方面就是有倡导采取措施，然后在这方面有重要贡献的这个个人和组织，然后能够报名参与我们本次奖项的评选。评选成功的个人或组织将被邀请到我们的达沃斯现场，然后现场领奖。关于我们这个绿色学习大奖的具体信息以及这个提名表的填写，大家可以扫右方的2维码。以上就是今天讲座的内容。我们今天的讲座呢就到此为止，然后下期再见。